So I think we get mixed up and we think that we have to do everything in terms of an orderly fashion, and we forget that we can actually do a lot, which is testing and test markets. Um, and what do I mean by that? I want to talk about that today, and then get into test markets in our own life. I think that this is really important in terms of figuring out what to do. So what I'm talking about with test markets is, or testing specifically, is just simply looking at the marketplace, right? So the marketplace, you don't know what is going to happen with it. You don't really understand how people are going to perceive what you have done or what you're working on, any of that kind of stuff, right? And the convention is not to do anything um, for a long time and then sort of do this big grand splash and put this thing out and do this, just a big grand splash where everybody is you're telling the world about it. So this might be the idea of a grand opening or something like that, right? So you put in all the work, you build this thing, and then you do this grand opening, right? Say you're a small business, and then you see what happens. You see what the reception is. Hopefully, you have a good reception, and everybody likes what you've done and you've worked on. Now, the problem with this is that you can work on things for a long time and not know how the market is actually going to perceive what you're doing and understand anything from all of your efforts. And so you can waste a tremendous amount of resources from this. So the opposite side of that is an interesting thing. So this is the reason why I actually favor doing the opposite side is doing test markets or testing where you put something out, you just see what the market is going to do or what the reaction is. Just put it out at any point in time and not really get upset about when you put it out. Barring safety constraints is an important thing, right? So it's got to be within, it's got to be safe and it sort of has to do its thing. But once you get it functioning, put it out and see what happens. I think that we get all caught up in terms of, making sure that there's this big fanfare. But, if you just put it out and see what happens, you might discover something really interesting, right? And what that interesting thing is, to me, nobody's going to pay attention to this thing. And, the vast majority of the time, nobody's going to pay attention to it. So that gives you information right there. It's like, wait a minute, what are we doing wrong here? What's actually going on? What's the problem? And that's where we got to take a step back and start thinking about things a little differently and start repositioning until somebody actually pays attention to this thing and that they actually care about it, right? So that's where you go back and you rejig it. You could just keep it up if you want, right? Like it doesn't matter, and figure out a way to rejig it so people actually pay attention to this thing and sort of get it. And often it's not as easy as you think it is, right? It's not just necessarily the product that might be doing it, but that might be sort of limiting you, but like the messaging or how you're selling this or the story you're telling, like all of these other things play a really important role that you're not going to get unless you put in that, unless you see that nothing happens with it. And so that's where you got to take a step back. And once you see that nothing happens, and you have to change the story that you're telling. You might change a little bit on the product, and then you do it again. You see what happens, and nothing happens again. And so you do that repeatedly until you start getting incremental improvements on people paying attention to it. Now, this makes a lot of sense within the business environment, right? To do these kind of incremental things just to see what's going to happen and be not so secretive about it, basically, and be open about it. Now, the downside, somebody's going to steal what you're working on, and that does happen. So you want to sort of balance how far you are ahead versus, somebody stealing from what you're actually doing. Now, chances are, though, is that nobody's going to steal from you because they don't care, right? Unless you're a major player, nobody cares. And so you have to figure out, how do I get people to actually care and start making a fanfare? When people actually care is when you're making traction, you're making progress. And so that is the thing that's important to pay attention to, is to get out there, and you'll get signals every once in a while, right? And you pay attention to those particular signals about what's happening, and you keep working at it to get towards where you need to go based on the signals that you get. Now, I think that this idea can be applied to all sorts of different areas of our lives, right? Or this idea of testing could be applied. So, my wife and I are building a pool right now. I might have mentioned that on this podcast, but um, you know, what we did initially is we bought a little outdoor pool that we splashed around on, just to see if um, we'd actually play in this pool. Now that pool cost about $600. Had circulating water. I was always poking holes in the thing, but it was deep enough and big enough that we can all splash around and enjoy. And we had a lot of fun. That was the summer of COVID. It was a good time, right? And so we realized that yes, we would actually use this thing. So before we put in the large, significant investment, the test proved that this was going to add a lot of joy to our life, right? So I like the water. The kids like the water. My wife is like, yeah, she'll like it. She likes it, but not to the same degree. Um, so, once you get that, once you figure it out that it works, then that makes sense. Now, another thing is like the job market, right? And looking for a job. Well, you can sort of test at different times to see what happens. I've did this in when I was finishing my PhD. I wanted to see what was happening, so I put out some applications. Nothing happened. Right, so that gave me a signal. I was like, no, this is not going to work out, and so I had to wait. I was more or less forced to wait. But it's the same sort of idea where you're looking and you're seeing. Wait a minute, instead of just waiting, or instead of just being perfect, you go out and you see what's going to happen. You try to see what's going to happen, and you try again, right? And you repeatedly do that. The risk, as people say, is people are gonna know that you've tried multiple times, but who cares, right? Like, ultimately, it's not that big of a deal to try multiple times, and I think we should all try, right? Like, that's the important thing, is to realize that there's a lot that you can possibly do to try to see what's going on. And I think the more that we just try things and do little sort of trial things, the more information we're going to get. And often we're probably going to make better decisions in the long run. So looking for small little things that you can test, not experiment, not anything like that, but test, just to see if this is going to work at a low cost, can greatly benefit you, because what's often going to happen, and this is the signal you're going to get, is nothing's going to happen. And so that gives you the information that, man, you got to do something, change something. There has to be something that has to be done, and maybe it's just keep doing the same thing that you're doing, which is often the case, but at least you got that information that you're just not ready yet, right? And knowing that gives you a lot and helps you sort of make long-term decisions. So I'd encourage you to think about this. It's how can you keep taking steps forwards while you're using and keep doing steps forward by using testing, by exploring what's going on with sort of low-cost options and trying those things, right? Before you make a large purchase in something, just go try it, right? Like, before you go take a job, see if you can work there for a few days, or job shadow for a few days. Like, little incremental things can help a lot in terms of understanding what is going on, and it's better to get that information than to invest too much in the thing that you're willing to make a large investment in. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.